How to shift identity so fast it feels illegal. All right, welcome back, ladies and gents. And we're going to talk about shifting identity and the role identity plays in creating the results we want in life, and basically how to do it so fast it feels illegal. I'm just using that as some clickbait title, get people's attention. Anyway, let's talk about that. So, hope all is well. That you guys are doing well. Because this is the thing. So, identity is the origin point of all results, right? Identity is the origin of reality. So, here you have your identity in the middle, right? This is the core you. I use id, right? But that's not really the id, like Freudian thing. It's just your identity, right? And here, the singular point is your identity. Everything else that sort of spawns around that. So let's say this is your desires. But then your desires go through a filter of your values. And then your values go through a filter of your environment. And then your environment goes through a filter of your relationships. And now this is not in any particular order because I actually think relationships would probably come first. But basically imagine you're like this sun ray, more and more and more. And then out here, once you get this layer through these layers, so let's just say after relationship environment, let's say this is responsibilities. And then you could even tack more of this, right? So this just keeps going and going and going. There's so many different layers, right? So then we have like our ego. So our ego would be like the things that protect us, our personalities, which persona comes from the Greek word person, which basically means mask, right? And the meaning behind it is that your personality is a mask you use to the world. And your ego is a part of that mask because it's there to protect you, right? It's there to protect your core central identity, your origin. But recognize all these things that we see, reality over here, emanates, and that we see is created from the identity, not the other way around. But when you don't have consciousness, what happens is you see reality, and then reality has gone through this filter of your ego, your responsibilities, your relationships, your environment, your values, your desires. And then by the time it gets back to you, by the time this feedback comes back to you, if your identity is thinking reality is the origin point of reality and not the shadow, your ID, what happens is you begin to believe this. And so then builds another layer around your identity, which we're going to call beliefs, right? And in this core layer of beliefs, what happens is your identity then sets off more energy, but then it filters through those beliefs, filters through those desires, those values, and this creates reality. And then you have this weird loop, right? But we have to recognize that loop that was created, right? So let's actually do this with red so we can see the actual trail. This loop, this feedback loop, we'll call it the creation loop, is actually originating from identity, not reality. So reality is a reflection of our identity, right? And that goes back to our core model of being, right? Which, because we are third degree beings, right? That's always going to be, as a human being, you are a third degree being. So you're always going to be split in spirit, mind, body. Your body is going to be about 2% of who you are. Your mind is going to make up about 18%. And the spirit is going to make up about 80%. Now, in terms of the Hermetic text, the word mind is used to describe both mind and spirit, but I use these different words to differentiate between the spirit, the mind, and the body, just so that we understand what the fundamental component is. You can even say that when you have mind and body together, this is your soul. There's just a lot of different words to describe the same thing, right? But it's ultimately that There's these three essential parts based in how you feel, your emotions, your thoughts, and then your actions. This is the last part of the equation. This is the shadow. Because it's only 2% of the thing, we don't put our energy and focus there. If you want to really create change, you want a quantum leap like we're talking about, you need to spend most of your energy, 80% of your energy on the emotions, and then the rest on your thoughts. And then 2% of that energy goes into your actions. And so you might say, well, what do you mean? It means that actions should feel fairly effortless. It's not that they don't require energy, but actions, when you're taking them from a place of identity, are going to feel fairly effortless. Just like if you have the identity that you're a lazy piece of crap, it's pretty effortless to sit around and do nothing. But if you have the identity that you're an athlete and that you're excellent and then you do that, it is very difficult to sit around and do nothing. It's excruciating, right? And there's a lot of athletes who go through that where their fundamental identity is based in their performance, and when they're not able to perform, it's very, very difficult for them. So it's understanding that identity is the origin of reality. That is a key principle today. Identity is the origin of reality. So, simply by knowing who you are, you will then be able to create and build your universe from that. So now let's talk about how do we actually go through and affect this? Because remember, this identity is based on this three-planar model: spirit, mind, and body. So everything you're going to see, from your beliefs, your desires, your values, your environment, your relationships, your responsibilities, your ego, your reality, is going to reflect this. And so when you look at your reality and you're like, well, I don't like this, then you got to focus on inside of you what's happening. Now, most of the time, if we don't have a very developed sense of consciousness, we're going to have to work backwards. We have to work through breaking through the ego and understanding that you're not your ego. We got to break through the ego and understand what are the identities, beliefs, the external validations, the attention-seeking behaviors that make up the ego, and move beyond that. Then we have to look at what we are beyond our responsibilities and the roles we play in people's lives. We have to see ourselves separated, not necessarily separated, but understanding that what we are beyond our relationships. That's the relationships of our family of origin, the relationships of any significant others, the relationships we have at work, other things. What we are away from the confines of our relationships with other people. Well, we are separated in different environments. So we have to see, what am I like when I'm at my place of origin, like your hometown. If you've never left your hometown, it's impossible to know really who you are, because you've never been or seen yourself in a different environment. You don't know how you interact. You don't know what changes or behaviors you're doing are based upon where you are versus who you are. And it's very hard to take that filter until you change that. So then you have values here, right? Values, desires, and beliefs are a bit more abstract in that these are decisions about how we choose to operate and move in the world, and about our internal structure and what's important to us. So the key to shifting all of this is just being able to boil and break down our identity from these core facets, these little factors, and really being able to refine and tweak them. So let's talk about how we do that. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to work from the inside out if we really want to make change that feels so fast it's illegal. Now, a lot of the time, I've shown you guys a map of the different laws, right? Where we talk about 7th degree law here at the bottom, right? So 7th degree law here at the bottom is going to be characterized by complexity and confusion. And this is all the different factors in life we need to keep track of, whether it's political parties, what we're eating, our daily intake of water, all these little things that we're constantly having to take care of. And if we're always trying to break down life by all these different rules, especially when you see like someone who has like a lot of rules or things like that or whatever, when you have like lots of standards, if you're very nitpicky or you have just a lot with a lot of things, you're operating by seventh degree principles, which is basically infinite complexity and confusion. That's essentially what seventh degree does. Now, sixth degree is where we start operating by universal law. So universal law is essentially where now we're moving into things that are coming in order, but we're talking about order in a temporal sense, right? And now, so universal law is going to be characterized by 12 steps. Almost always, if something is built in by 12 steps, so from our calendar to the way our time works on so from our calendar, the clock on a day, the 12-step program from Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Astrology, the 12 zodiac signs, all of this is based in universal law. These are what we would call sixth degree principles, right? Where they're bringing order in from reality, but only in a temporal sense. So there's still a lot of abstraction and there's not a lot of reliability behind these, but at least there's some simplicity building. Then we move higher into fifth degree. Now, fifth degree is characterized by 7 steps. Here, the core of it, we have the Hermetic teachings. You're also going to have the 7 days of the week. You're going to have 7 being the number of completion in old Judeo-Hebrew and Islamic text, the number of God, it's the number of completion, right? And fifth degree law also matches up with the 7 degrees, obviously, because there's 7 steps. So this is a very powerful foundation, and this, what we would call, is the law of mind. And this is sort of like the central cog. If you can master this and really understand this, this will start giving profound order to your mind. This will give profound order to your mind. It won't necessarily make you feel good, but you're going to start understanding things. Things are going to start getting clear. And typically, if you have any framework or understanding of life that makes sense in your head and there's just a clear order, chances are it's following one, if not all, of the 7 Hermetic teachings. So then after that, we have 4th degree law right here. 4th degree law is considered by commitment and creation. So now it's not only that there's order in our mind, but now it gives us the capacity to create and learning how we create from a commitment place. This has 5 steps and is characterized by a lot more abstraction based in kind of who you are, and is less about these ideas in your head and more about living principles in your life, right? So this is where you take like the 5 elements of the world, so like earth, water, wind, fire, void, or heart, depending on how you want to do it if you're Captain Planet. And then you have like the 5 platonic solids, and then you have the 5 laws of the covenant, which is an old Islam, like not Islamic, but Judeo-Christian. So the laws of the covenant, which are basically how God made, like in old Jews, how they said God basically made covenants with people, right? And they take that, but stepping away from the religious aspects, it's more just like there's 5 essential steps for if you want to create anything. And anything that leads to creation is never going to take more than 5 simple steps. If it's taking more than 5 steps to create something, it means that there's some extra fluff put in there, and that really we're just you're messing around. So to creation, for laws of creation to really build things, there's just 5 core steps that you need to do, right? But moving past all of this, now we step into the realm of identity, where now we're stepping into the more quote unquote spiritual realm, which basically just means beyond the physical, beyond the mind. Beyond the mind. And when you step beyond all this, now you're into the higher levels of law, right? Which third degree, you have 3 laws. Second degree, you have 2 laws. And then first degree, you have 1 law, right? Pretty simple. So all this stuff is fairly congruent, right? Here you see there's an incongruence with the laws being step 4, you have 5 steps, 5, you have 7, 6, you have 12, and 7, you basically have infinite, right? But at these, there's congruence, right? And so in order to do this is essentially where you step into this level of being, where you have emotions, thoughts, actions, and everything is just built off of that. And so that's built off of justice, essentially karma, mercy, the other side of karma, sending things out or allowing things to be, and then grace, which is that time buffer in between, right? And so in order to effectively live out and kind of quantum jump, so let's say you're here. This is where we start understanding. So most of the time, if you're trying to live, you'll say you're living in a life of complexity and confusion. And you're like, I don't know what I want. I don't know who I am. I don't know what's going on with myself. And you want to jump up here. Here, I need to make sure it's still running. Sweet. The camera turns off sometimes. It's super annoying and I hate it. So I want to make sure we're doing it. But now let's say we're here living at complexity and confusion. And you're like, man, I don't know how I'm going to get all the way up here. Because you've got to go through, learn all these universal laws and learn these Hermetic laws and then learn these 5 steps of creation, This is all confusing. Now, this is the thing. You are doing this all the time. What I'm showing you here is just a framework so that you can understand the mechanics of how things are already happening. Let that sink in. This is not something new. This is something that you are already doing, but you are unaware. You are already living by these principles. Everybody is already living by these principles. No one is exempt from these principles. When you understand these principles, you will begin to see where and how people fit in. This is like a map, right? And what happens is, on this map, you can essentially find and detect where people are. Most people are down here. I would say probably 80% of the world is down here, right? I would say 15 here, and then after here, you have basically 4.8 something percent here, and then 0.02% live up here. So when you say, I want to live up here, you are separating yourself from 98% of people. 98% of people. Because what happens? You're not basing your percent off the body anymore. You're not looking at physical reality as though that's the only extension. And when you move past the mind, you're not staying, remember, this is all the mind here. So you're not staying in this area where you're thinking only thoughts and such matter. You're now acknowledging all of it, right? Because to go up here, it trickles down. So remember, reality trickles down. So when you are living at first degree law, you have authority over all the other lower laws. But when you're living at 7th degree law, you only have authority over the lower 7th degree laws. When you live at 6th degree law, you have authority over these, but it trickles down because that's how fundamental reality works. And so you got to understand, like when I say like 99.8%, right? And you're living up here, it's like 98%. Most people are never living up here. So when you say, hey, I want to live in perfect alignment, perfect harmony, I want to live in happiness. Okay, so out of 100 people, if you just take a cross section out of 100 people, 1 person will understand you. Are you okay to be misunderstood like that? That's the first thing you got to ask yourself. Am I okay being that different? Am I okay out of 100 people being the one and only person out of 100, right? Am I okay scoring that low on the test of approval? Am I okay scoring 1% based off of approval, people's understanding, my sense of relatability? Because it's these attachments to these things, right? It's attachments to validation. It's attachments to community. It's attachments to basically fitting in. This is what keeps you stuck. Because at the end of the day, you're afraid to leave the herd. You're still suffering from herd mentality, which is you find safety in the herd. And if you're saying like, wait, what are you talking? So oftentimes the reason people have to take their time is they have to get used to the emotions here, and then get used to the emotions here. Then get used to the emotions here, and get used to the emotions here. But you don't actually need all that. It's just time, space. You just have to be willing to cross the emotional gap here. Now you might say, well, what's the emotional gap? Take a good look at all of this, because we're gonna use a different framework to cover it. Because now diving into these emotions, right? What are the emotions we're experiencing? What are the things that we're gonna have to go through? And this is going back to this core philosophy that I have been talking about in all my videos, which is essentially going down to the Hawkins scale, right? So we have the Hawkins scale. Down here we have the heavy emotions, so shame, guilt, apathy. And after apathy you have fear, desire, then pride, anger. Then after that, you start getting into the last negative emotions. So now you have courage, neutrality, willingness, acceptance. And these are all sort of the emotional vibrations. And then after that, at the higher end, now you have things like joy, peace. Actually, peace is higher. Love, peace, and then enlightenment, right? And this is a place of flow. This is, as he calls it, getting by. Just existing. Call this kind of NPC land, right? This up here, this is NPC land. This is where people go to die. And this is suffering. Now the reason I put it here is because relative to everything else, these are how big these emotions are, right? So relative, this is about how big the universe and the identity is when you're in a place of suffering, right? Now, when you're in a place of getting by is tough. So I put it all the way up here, but it's really down here. I'm coloring it in so you guys can see how this all sits relatively to everything else. Just so you can understand. So this is a really big principle, right? Is because even though it might feel like, oh man, life's overwhelming or whatever, if you look at it, the overwhelming amount of power and life that exists is absolutely within flow. Within flow. So there's an overwhelming amount of more within flow. But the thing is, when we're attached to what's here, because remember, 80% of people are right here. 80% of things you're seeing is just suffering. When you're watching the news, you're going to like political rallies, when eating like whatever. When you're just doing what most people do, this is what you're gonna get. You're gonna get suffering. And so in order to do that, you have to be willing to release those attachments. And you release those attachments you can move up these emotions. But remember, you can experience and go through the phase of these emotions. Time is relative term. So understanding that, you can experience all these emotions for say a minute and then choose to enjoy this moment, this feeling for the rest of the day. And we all have to go through and work on processing and coming to understand and getting acclimated to these. Now, the difficulty is your body is going to fight you because your body is still attached to time and space. Obviously, it's a body. This is why so many people, like in these old religious texts and everything like that, they always talked about like overcoming the body. They didn't talk about the body like it was this shameful, terrible thing. But because your body is attached to time and space, when you go through and you start processing these higher emotions, your consciousness does not have the space to process all these emotions all at once. So it is deeply uncomfortable for your body. You'll start getting a shock when you start telling yourself, hey, I'm going to feel peace, I'm going to feel joy, I'm going to feel light. And the reason we're talking so much about the emotions and not necessarily the vision is because you have to find the emotions that attach to the vision of whatever it is you want, whatever that identity is, right? So let's say you want to become the best dancer in the world, and you just think like, man, if I was just the best dancer in the world, that'd be great. To be a good dancer, you have to come from a place of flow. So in coming from a place of flow, you then most of the time are probably going to associate joy with that. So you have to come from that place of joy and then root your identity there. But when you are trying and saying like, man, I suck, like I'm not able to do this, and so I feel behind, I'm going to just do better, and then what happens is you start to move away from that identity. You might get good, you might even become like one of the best in the world, and you might even be the best, but you're not going to feel that because you are putting all that energy down, and most of the time you're going to push yourself right back into desire, or you're going to put yourself into pride, and then you're going to put yourself into anger. And you're going to have a very frustrating, difficult to go at it because you're focusing so much on the body and your actions rather than understanding the emotional aspect of being, right? Because when you're here in the spirit, everything collected, trickled down, you are an aspect of being. Your mind is what receives. Your mind receives. And your body gives. And your spirit just is. It is being, it is. And when we can focus on being rather than giving to receive in our mind, we shortcut the process. We hack the process because now, instead of needing reality to confirm to us where we'll give, receive what happens to us, and then let that affect our being, we start from our being and we put that out, and then we look for any little signs. We work from this way out, where we are from our being. We receive inspiration, intuition based off our alignment, and then we give according to that. And then we allow reality to be the mirror. We allow reality to come at the final step, not the first. And that is how you shift, is instead of seeing reality as telling you who you are, you need to recognize that who you are is telling what reality is. And so when you start recognizing my reality is a reflection of who I am, if I want to change my reality, I need to simply accept and move into this higher vibration of who I am. And then once I do, I'm going to fall into alignment. And then when I fall into alignment, putting 80% of my energy on how I feel and my emotions, 18% of that controlling my thoughts, and then the other 2% in controlling your actions and understanding your full sense of being, your actions are going to come effortlessly and they're going to be aligned. It doesn't mean you don't work, it doesn't mean you don't do things, but now they're coming from this place of alignment. They're coming from this place of non-anxiety, non-pride, non-fear, not anger. But when we do and we act and we push from this place of, I gotta get away, I gotta get ahead, You're coming from this place of fear. So you're now only working with this tiny fraction of energy that you could have access to all this. And so this is why it's so important to come up here, because especially when we start living great, amazing lives, we're having access to this level of power, not this. But that comes from embracing being as our fundamental way of operation, not receiving, not giving, not doing, not having, but being. And when that becomes a fundamental place of operation, reality begins to change like that. So be joyful, be loving, be peaceful, and allow that to come out. And then your filters will filter out all the rest of that stuff. So anyway, hope this video was helpful and that it made sense to you. If not, put some questions down in the comments below. Help me to kind of direct. I don't know how people are receiving this. I'd be interested in seeing your guys' thoughts. Hope all is well. Stay happy, stay healthy. And remember, be more, do less.